All right, so next let's talk about rearranging variables and or rearranging the data and adding and dropping variables here. So there's a few different things you can do to sort of rearrange things in the data, maybe make it easier for you to look at the data. The one thing is just to sort. So this is just going to sort the data first by this variable, first by this variable. It does least to most, or if it's text, it does alphabetical A to Z, right? So that's what this sorting would do. First by foreign, so with first foreign, domestic, then foreign, and we're doing alphabetical, foreign, and then make. There's also a gsort command, which will sort things. You can either do it, the regular way, or you can do it in descending order. So this would be like the highest price at the first, and then to the lowest price, right? All right. Also, something that is very helpful if you're trying to keep track of stuff in your head a little bit is to reorder the variables, right? So if there's some variables that you're like going to be really thinking about, and there's other variables that you're not really using much, one thing to do is just move the ones you're thinking about to the front, so they show up right over here. Especially if you got lots of variables that are, you can't look at everything at the same time. That can be useful. You could also just drop some variables to clean things up, right? We could, for example, we could drop gear ratio. Boom. No more gear ratio there. Of course, you can't then turn around and be like, oh, I want to use gear ratio. It's no longer there. STATA has forgotten about it, right? If you did this and you're like, oh shoot, you can always, if you've run the do file, if you've got the do file, this is another example where if you're just working out of the command prompt, it can be a real pain. If you got the do file and you like, oh, I didn't mean to do this, then we can just say, okay, run me up to here. Oops, I added a purposeful error here before, if you remember. You can just say, okay, run me up to the present. Bam, I'm right up to where I was. Of course, now I've dropped gear ratio again, but you understand the point. We could also, if we really want to clean things up, we can just use the keep command to just keep these variables that we're interested in, right? So now we've only got these variables. All right, adding new variables. So there's a few different ways to add new variables. Just as an example here, I think this is a way that people typically start, right? So let's say we want to add, is the miles per gallon 20 miles per gallon? Yes or no, right? We might say generate this variable, set it equal to, again, we're using the 1 equal sign there, set it equal to 1 if miles per gallon equals 20, right? Notice what's happening here is if we didn't tell it to do something, if we didn't tell it to generate a value for the variable, it's just setting it to missing. So if we set it up that way, we're gonna have a bunch of missings and some ones. If what we really want is a bunch of zeros and some ones, then we need to think a little bit more carefully about this, right? So for example, we could do something like this. Where we generate a bunch of zeros, and then we're going to replace the observations of this variable with 1 if, in this case, I'm doing a high and low miles per gallon, if the miles per gallon is greater than 20, right? So there you can see real changes made. It tells you we made some changes. Here we've got a bunch of zeros and some ones. Okay. let's, so there's a shortcut here we could use, which is to do this all in one line. So remember, if we tell STATA some logical operator, it's going to tell us true or false. Here we're saying price is the price of this observation greater than or equal to 5,000. If it's true, if it's greater than or equal to, it's going to give us a 1, otherwise 0. So we can just do that in one line. Now, you want to be a little cautious here because of how STATA handles missing observations. So as an example, let's do the same kind of thing here where we're saying we're using this rep 78 variable. We're saying we're creating something that says, is it a 4 or 5? Have there been 4 or 5 repairs, I guess, in 1978, by 1978. So if we create this, and then we look at the tab here between this new variable that we've created and the original variable, we see something problematic, right? And that's that when this variable is missing, we're counting it as a 1 when we create our indicator variable for this category, right? And the reason is because STATA takes a missing observation and thinks of it as like a really big number. Okay, so when we did this greater than or equal to, it had a missing here for these 5 observations, and it called them bigger than 4, right? Which caused the problem. So we can see that if we just do something silly like this, we're saying, hey, STATA is missing greater than 999, and STATA says yes, right? That's why that's throwing this off. Okay, and we can say STATA is 2 greater than missing, and STATA is like, no, 2 is not greater than missing. So this just means you got to be a little bit careful when you're creating these variables, especially if you're trying to do like a little shortcut here, because you got to think about those missings, right? So if you know you've got some missing observations in there, you're going to need to come back with the replace command, something like this, where you're saying, hey, come back and replace that indicator variable with a missing if the underlying variable is missing. Right, so you can see 5 real changes made turn like 5 to missing. Okay, so that's an important thing to remember. Lots of other things we could do to create variables, right? We can add, subtract, divide, multiply, any sort of any math that you can think of, you can do to create a variable. Another thing that can be useful is to use this in range function, which is basically, let me just add a little space here. So if we wanted to create some categories for miles per gallon, maybe like a high, medium, low, we could do that by, we're saying category miles per gallon. Our 15 miles per gallon category is going to be anything between miles per gallon 10 and 20, right? Where it's greater than or equal to and less than or equal to there. So we can do that. A couple more categories, and we've got 3 categories here. Oops. For that variable.